The Matrix changed my life, and then over these years, it's changed so many other people's lives in really positive and great ways.
Well, first of all, we all love you. Do you feel that love on a daily basis? Do you feel the love that we send your way?
It was a regular day in Los Angeles. The sun was shining, people were rushing to work, and the streets were busy with life. But for one homeless man sitting quietly on the sidewalk, the day wasn't so bright. His clothes were worn out, and his face showed the struggles of a hard life. People passed by, barely giving him a second glance.
So who is this homeless maestro? His name is Donald Gould, and we caught up with him today. He can't believe he's become an overnight sensation.
Some looked away, pretending he wasn't even there. Others walked faster, as if being near him made them uncomfortable. But the man didn't give up. He stayed hopeful, holding a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, please help." Every now and then, he would ask someone for a little help, a spare dollar, some change, or even just a smile. Most people ignored him, acting like they couldn't hear him. Then, something unexpected happened. A tall man with dark hair and kind eyes walked down the street. He was dressed simply, wearing a plain black jacket and jeans. He didn't look like a celebrity, but that's exactly who he was, Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. Known for his roles in movies like The Matrix and John Wick, Keanu was also famous for something else. His humility and kindness. The homeless man, unaware of who Keanu was.
Everyone's realizing Mr. Reeves is too good for this world. But for all of those who've been sleeping on Keanu throughout his 30-year career,
Looked up and asked in a quiet voice, "Can you give me $1?" Keanu stopped. For a moment, there was silence. The people around them paused, curious to see what would happen next. Would he ignore the man like so many others? Or would he simply give the dollar and walk away? But what Keanu did next left everyone shocked in that simple moment. Keanu showed the world why he is more than just a movie star. He didn't just give the man a dollar. What he did was far more powerful, a gesture that touched the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. A moment that will surprise you. It was a warm afternoon in Los Angeles. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the busy sidewalks. People hurried along, some shopping, others talking with friends, all moving quickly from one place to another. Among the crowd of well-dressed shoppers and tourists, one man sat on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard. His clothes were worn, his hair tangled, and his eyes looked tired. He was a homeless man named Dave, and like every day, he was hoping for a little kindness. Dave held a small cardboard sign that read simply, "Hungry, anything helps." It was his way of asking for help, just like so many others who lived on the streets of the city. He didn't have much, just a small pile of change in front of him. It wasn't even enough to buy a snack from a convenience store, but it was all he had. As people walked by, most of them ignored him. They were too busy with their own lives to notice. Some even crossed the street to avoid him, unwilling to make eye contact. Dave sighed. His stomach growled, and he felt the weight of hunger deep in his bones. He knew better than to expect much from the people around him. But sometimes, seeing everyone rush by with their fancy shopping bags and expensive coffees made him feel invisible. He just wanted a simple, hot meal to fill his stomach for once. Dave was about to give up for the day. His hopes were low, and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows on the street. But just as he was about to gather his things and head somewhere else, he saw someone coming toward him. The man was tall, dressed simply in a black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. His face was partly hidden by sunglasses, but Dave had a feeling he had seen him before. The man looked familiar, but Dave couldn't place him right away. The man walked up to Dave and stopped in front of him. He took off his sunglasses and looked at the sign in Dave's hands.
A lot of people ignore the homeless, but folks rushing past Moses Elder may regret their haste.
I'm blowing it.
Because this week, all people had to do was pay him some attention,
Ladies!
and he would pay them back.
Then he smiled, a warm, kind smile that reached his eyes. He knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with Dave. "Hey there," the man said, his voice gentle. "How's it going today?" Dave looked up, surprised that someone had actually stopped to talk to him. Most people just ignored him, but this man seemed different. His voice was calm, and his smile made Dave feel a little less invisible. Dave cleared his throat, his voice rough and tired. "Could be better," he said, his voice soft. "Just trying to get enough for something to eat." The man nodded, still smiling. "I hear you," he said. "I've been there before. I can't promise a lot, but I've got something for you." With that, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. He held them out to Dave, who was still trying to figure out who this kind stranger was. Dave took the money, his hands shaking a little, not believing what had just happened. "Thank you," Dave said, his voice filled with gratitude. But then, something even more unexpected happened. The man smiled again, then reached into his bag and pulled out a large sandwich, still wrapped up neatly in paper. He handed it to Dave. "Here's something to eat," the man said. "It's not much, but I hope it helps." Dave's eyes widened. He hadn't expected this. A real meal, a simple sandwich, was more than he had hoped for that day. It wasn't just the money, but the kindness of this stranger that made Dave's heart swell with emotion. "Wow, thank you," Dave said again, struggling to find the right words. "You really didn't have to do this." The man smiled one last time and stood up, ready to leave. "Take care of yourself," he said, giving Dave a final nod. "Stay strong." As the man walked away, Dave sat there for a moment, still in shock. Who was this man, and why had he been so kind? Then, it hit him. The man had looked familiar because he was Keanu Reeves, the famous actor known for his roles in The Matrix, and John Wick. Dave couldn't believe it. Keanu Reeves, a Hollywood star, had just stopped to help him. It wasn't just the money or the sandwich that shocked Dave. It was the kindness, the way Keanu had treated him like a person, not just a homeless man on the street. Keanu's response was more than just surprising. It was a reminder of the simple power of kindness, a small gesture that could change someone's day and maybe even their life. For Dave, that moment would stay with him forever. A heartwarming story. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. He glanced at the bills inside before looking back at Dave. With a gentle smile, he said, "Tell you what, how about I take you out to get something to eat? You can order whatever you want." Dave's eyes widened in disbelief. He had been hoping for just $1 or $2, maybe enough to buy a simple sandwich. But this stranger was offering to buy him a full meal. For a moment, Dave hesitated, unsure if he had heard correctly. "You mean, like a real meal?" Dave asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded. "A real meal," he repeated with warmth. "Come on, there's a diner just down the street." Dave slowly stood up, his legs shaky from hunger and surprise. He followed the man down the bustling sidewalk, still trying to process what was happening. Was this real, or just a dream? As they walked, Dave noticed people turning their heads, their eyes widening in recognition. Curious whispers spread through the crowd, and a few even pulled out their phones to snap pictures. Dave glanced at his companion, the realization slowly dawning on him. His heart began to race. "Wait a minute," Dave said, his voice trembling slightly. Are you Keanu Reeves?" The man smiled, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Guilty," he said with a small shrug. "But today I'm just a guy who wants to share a meal with a new friend." Dave couldn't help but smile. His heart swelled with gratitude. He had never expected such kindness, let alone from someone like Keanu Reeves. They reached the diner, and Keanu held the door open for Dave, motioning for him to go inside. The warm scent of freshly cooked food filled the air, making Dave's stomach growl. The waitress behind the counter looked up and her eyes widened in surprise. She recognized the celebrity instantly, but Keanu just smiled politely and gestured toward a booth by the window. "2 menus, please," Keanu said kindly. The waitress nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she handed them the menus before hurrying off, clearly excited to have such a famous guest in the diner. Dave slid into the booth, his hands trembling as he picked up the menu. It had been so long since he'd had the luxury of choosing his own meal. The list of dishes felt overwhelming: burgers, sandwiches, hot soup, and even desserts. For the first time in a long while, Dave didn't have to worry about what he could afford. He could simply pick what he wanted. Looking across the table, he saw Keanu watching him with a kind, patient expression. In that moment, Dave realized it wasn't just about the food. It was about being seen, treated with dignity, and reminded that kindness still exists, even in the most unexpected places. A meal with Keanu Reeves of kindness and hope. Keanu watched Dave closely, a gentle smile on his face. He could see the hesitation in Dave's eyes and wanted to put him at ease. "Get whatever you want, Dave," Keanu said softly. "No limits." Dave's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the menu again. His eyes scanned the list of meals, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he could choose something he actually wanted, not just something cheap. His mouth watered as he looked at the options. After a moment, Dave placed his order, a juicy burger with fries, a side of crispy onion rings, and a large chocolate milkshake. Keanu ordered a burger for himself, and they both handed their menus back to the waitress, who quickly took them to the kitchen. As they waited for their food, Keanu leaned forward, starting a conversation. "So, Dave, tell me a bit about yourself." At first, Dave hesitated. It wasn't often that someone asked about his life, let alone someone like Keanu Reeves. But something about Keanu's kind eyes and gentle voice made it easy to open up. Dave began to share his story. He talked about how he had lost his job when the company he worked for shut down. With no steady income, he couldn't pay his rent and was eventually evicted. With nowhere else to go, he found himself living on the streets. "It wasn't easy," Dave admitted, his voice low. "One day turned into weeks, and then months. You just get used to being invisible." Keanu listened intently, nodding as Dave spoke. He didn't interrupt or try to change the subject. Instead, he offered quiet words of comfort when needed. "You've been through a lot," Keanu said, his voice filled with genuine empathy. "But you're still here. That takes strength." Dave shrugged, his eyes downcast. "I don't feel strong," he admitted. "Most days I just feel tired." Keanu reached across the table, gently placing a hand on Dave's shoulder. "It's okay to feel that way," Keanu said softly. "Life can be really tough sometimes. But just remember you're not alone. There are people who care." Dave looked up, his eyes misty with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "I can't tell you how much this means to me." Just then, their food arrived. The waitress placed the plates in front of them, and Dave's eyes lit up as he took in the sight of the hot, delicious meal. He picked up the burger, took a bite, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of happiness. Keanu watched him eat, a satisfied smile on his face. He didn't rush the moment or fill the silence with unnecessary words. Instead, they ate together in comfortable quiet, the simple act of sharing a meal creating a bond between them. When they finished, Keanu signaled for the check. The waitress returned with the bill, and Keanu handed her a credit card. But before she walked away, he slipped a folded $100 bill into her hand. The waitress's eyes widened in surprise, but Keanu simply smiled and said, "That's for you. Thank you for taking care of us." As Dave watched the interaction, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't just about the meal or the kindness of a stranger. It was about being seen, valued, and reminded that even in a world that often feels cold, there are still people who care. Keanu stood up, extending a hand to Dave. "Take care of yourself, Dave. And remember you're stronger than you think." Dave shook Keanu's hand, a smile spreading across his face. "I won't forget this," he said softly. As Keanu walked out of the diner and back into the busy streets of Los Angeles, Dave sat quietly for a moment, savoring the warmth of the meal and the kindness he had been shown. For the first time in a long time, he felt like things could get better. And maybe, just maybe, they would. Simple act of kindness that changed a man's life. Keanu smiled as he handed the waitress the money. "This is for you," he said kindly. "Thank you for taking care of us." The waitress's eyes widened, and she stammered a surprised, "Thank you." She was clearly overwhelmed by the gesture. Keanu gave her a warm nod before turning back to Dave. "Come on, Keanu said, his voice gentle. "Let's get you some supplies." Dave followed Keanu out of the diner. His stomach was full, and his heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. The kindness he had received today was more than just a meal. It was a reminder that there were still good people in the world. They walked to a nearby store, and Keanu grabbed a shopping cart. He handed it to Dave with a smile. "Get whatever you need: food, clothes, toiletries. Let's make sure you're taken care of," Keanu said. Dave hesitated, his eyes starting to well up with tears. "You don't have to do all this," he said. His voice shaking, Keanu gently shook his head. "I want to," he said simply. "Everyone deserves a little kindness." Dave slowly started to fill the cart. He grabbed some toothpaste, soap, socks, and a couple of shirts. Keanu added a few more things, including a warm jacket and a blanket. They made their way to the checkout, where Keanu paid for everything without hesitation. The cashier couldn't help but stare in awe at the sight of the Hollywood star helping a homeless man. As they stepped out of the store, Keanu handed Dave the bags. His expression was soft and caring. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Keanu said. "And remember, things can get better." Dave nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I will. Thank you, Keanu." He paused for a moment, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness. "You've given me more than just food and supplies today. You've given me hope." Keanu smiled and gave Dave a pat on the back. "That's all I wanted to do," he said. "You hang in there, okay?" Dave stood there, watching as Keanu walked away and disappeared into the crowd. The bags were heavy in his hands, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He had spent so much time feeling invisible, forgotten by the world. But today, someone had truly seen him and treated him like he mattered. Word of Keanu's act of kindness spread quickly. People who had witnessed the scene shared their stories on social media. Pictures of Keanu sitting with Dave in the diner and of him helping Dave carry his bags out of the store went viral. It wasn't just the meal or the supplies that made a difference for Dave. It was the reminder that there was still kindness in the world. A simple gesture from a stranger had given him a new sense of hope, and for that, he would be forever grateful. Keanu Reeves' simple act of kindness not only changed Dave's life, but also touched the hearts of many who heard the story. People were moved by the actor's genuine compassion, his willingness to help someone without expecting anything in return. He didn't make a big deal about it. He didn't post about it on social media or mention it in interviews. For Keanu, it wasn't about getting attention. It was about making a difference, even if it was just for one person. Keanu, quote,'s quiet approach to kindness made the gesture even more meaningful. It showed that real compassion doesn't need to be flashy or celebrated publicly. It's the small, quiet acts that can make the biggest impact. He just wanted to help Dave because it was the right thing to do. As for Dave, the effect of that day stayed with him long after Keanu walked away. The kindness he experienced filled him with a renewed sense of hope. The supplies Keanu had bought helped Dave get back on his feet. He used the toothpaste, soap, and clothes to take care of himself, and slowly but surely, things began to improve. Dave found a shelter that helped him get back on track. They connected him with a job placement program, and within a few months, Dave had secured a part-time job. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, Dave felt like he had a chance to rebuild his life. Every now and then, when he felt like giving up, Dave would think back to that day in the diner. He remembered Keanu sitting with him, listening to his story, and treating him like he mattered. That memory kept him going. It reminded him that there were still good people in the world, and that kindness could still be found, even in the most unexpected places. Keanu's act of kindness wasn't just a one-time gesture, it became a symbol for many people. It showed that, no matter how famous or rich someone is, what really matters are the small acts of compassion that can make a difference in someone's life. People saw Keanu's example and were inspired to reach out to others in need. They started to notice the people who were often ignored or forgotten: the homeless, the lonely, the struggling. And they began to offer their help in whatever way they could. As for Dave, he never forgot the day that Keanu sat down with him, bought him a meal, listened to his story, and gave him hope. It was a day that changed everything. It was a day that reminded Dave that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for light to break through. And sometimes, that light comes from the kindness of a stranger who sees you for who you are and offers help when you need it the most. That simple act from Keanu had a ripple effect. One small gesture sparked kindness in others and gave Dave the strength to change his life. And for Dave, it wasn't just about the meal or the clothes. It was about the feeling that someone cared. After all the struggles, setbacks, and moments of doubt, Dave's story became one of hope and inspiration. The kindness shown by Keanu Reeves wasn't just a random act. It was a lifeline, a reminder that compassion still exists in a world that often feels too busy or indifferent. What started as a simple conversation between two strangers turned into a life-changing experience for Dave, one that would stay with him forever. Keanu's decision to stop and talk to Dave, to share a meal and offer help, showed that kindness doesn't have to be grand or flashy to make a difference. It's in the small gestures, the willingness to see someone in need and do something about it, that real change happens. Keanu didn't need to draw attention to his actions. He didn't want recognition. For him, the reward was in knowing that he had made a difference, however small, in someone's life. For Dave, the memory of that day stayed with him long after Keanu had walked away. It wasn't just about the food or the supplies Keanu bought him. It was the feeling that someone saw him, that he mattered. Dave had spent so many days feeling invisible, forgotten by the world around him. But that moment when a stranger took the time to listen to him, to care about his well-being, changed everything. It gave him the strength to keep going, even when life felt impossible. In the weeks and months that followed, Dave worked hard to get back on his feet. He used the supplies Keanu gave him to clean up, find shelter, and start looking for work. The part-time job he eventually found wasn't much, but it was enough to begin rebuilding his life. He realized that, even though he had a long road ahead, he wasn't walking it alone. The kindness of a stranger had lit a spark of hope inside him, a spark that would continue to burn no matter what obstacles came his way. Keanu's act of kindness also had a ripple effect on others. People who heard the story were inspired by the selflessness of a Hollywood star who cared enough to make a difference. It reminded everyone that, no matter how successful or famous someone is, it's the little things that matter most. It's the moments when we choose to be kind, to help someone who needs it, that make the biggest impact in the world. The story of Keanu and Dave shows us that no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always a chance for change. And that change often begins with a small act of kindness. Whether it's helping a stranger, lending a hand to someone in need, or simply offering a listening ear, these are the moments that have the power to change lives. As for Dave, he will never forget the day that Keanu Reeves showed him kindness. It was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there is always hope, and that there are people who care. And for all of us, it's a powerful lesson to remember that a little kindness can go a long way, and that even the smallest gesture can make a world of difference to someone who needs it most. So, the next time you see someone in need, remember Dave's story and Keanu's example. You never know how much of an impact you might have on someone's life just by showing them a little kindness.